Hey, how are you? I'm gonna do this video. I've always enjoyed talking about the nuances of real estate, and I've been working on building out the YouTube channel to really get into some of those details, and I got a lot of great stuff coming up. But the changes in the real estate market are here. I think a lot of this has flown under the radar. I've talked with a few consumers that haven't heard anything about it. But if you're going to be looking for a house in the future, really basically anytime after you see this video, there are going to be some really important changes that, like I said, a lot of people don't know about. And this is my public service announcement in terms of explaining to buyers out there the kinds of changes that are going to be out there. And I'm going to try to give an overview of the kinds of things you should expect and the kinds of ways that you should educate yourself about how to be a buyer in this market. So I'm going to try and do the overview of why things are changing in like less than a minute and a half, which is not enough time, so you'll just have to follow along here on the slides. But in order to keep this video a little bit shorter, I'm going to skip over some of this. But basically there was an enormous lawsuit where the National Association of Realtors, which is called NAR as it's listed here, was fined hundreds of millions of dollars, or they agreed to settle for hundreds of millions of dollars, basically for not being consumer friendly. Now there's a lot that goes into that. I've got to skip over it in the interest of time. They also sued all the major franchises. I think they got them all, and they all settled too. So as a result of that settlement, there are significant practice changes that specifically affect buyer agency, and that's what we're going to be talking about here. I will do another video for sellers, but this one is targeted specifically at buyers. So if you're going to be selling, feel free to reach out to me, and we'll talk about what exactly that means for you there if I don't have the video up yet. So who am I? Why should you listen to me? Well, my name is Matt. I run a video tube channel called Inside Real Estate, and I am the broker owner of Vanderbilt Properties in Massachusetts. I have 22 years selling real estate. I've done hundreds of transactions. I am not an attorney, so I'm going to talk about some legal aspects of the case here, and some other things that you might want to do to protect yourself, but not a lawyer, and I'm not looking at the contracts that are in front of you. So you should recognize that I'm just doing this as a public service announcement, and that you should really, if you need legal advice, you should talk to an attorney. So again, in the interest of time, I'm going to go right through this commission piece here, but if I ask 99% of the consumers out there today who pays real estate commissions, they will tell you the seller. And the truth is that's an oversimplification of what happens. Really what happens is the buyer brings the money and the seller brings the house. Those two things are what create a transaction, and the money that the buyer has eventually finds its way over to the buyer agent. So really, both the buyer and the seller contribute to the transaction, and everyone pays commissions. But no one talks about it like that. And why is it? Well, it's because it's been convention for a long time that the sellers determine what the commissions are going to be as part of the listing contract. And if you look at the closing disclosures, when these properties are settled out, the commission goes on the seller side. But that's a convention. That's just how we do it. It's not a legal thing. And what a big part of the lawsuit was about was untangling that so that buyers understood what buyer agents are making, and sellers only have to worry about what listing agents are making. And that's really the big change. Sellers no longer have to pay anything for buyer agents. Now, I think most sellers are going to, and if they want to, they're going to have to fill out special paperwork going forward. That's the deal. And there are really good reasons why sellers should pay buyer agents. Incentivizing people to come to see your house to buy it is generally considered a good idea, but they don't have to. Okay, now again, I'm going to do another separate video for sellers that sort of explains the give and take of whether or not that's a good idea, but I'm not going to touch any of that here. The bottom line is I don't know how many sellers, nobody knows how many sellers aren't going to be offered buyer agent commissions, but it's going to be a lot higher than it is today. And when they do that, that means buyer agents aren't going to get paid anything from the seller when they go to sell that house. So, as a natural fix for that, buyer agents are now required, again, as part of the settlement now, we've all agreed to do this, we're required to negotiate our compensation with buyers up front and contractually through what are called buyer agency agreements. Now, the contracts are required, but we are not given any direction as to the nature of the contracts themselves, how long the contract should be, or how big an area it might cover, or how many houses, or all sorts of things. So these contracts are probably over time going to have quite a bit of variation from place to place. And I think just filling in the blanks, there can be a lot of different structures that are going to be available for the consumers. But you should know that if you want to go see a house and you want to go see it with a buyer agent, he is not going to show you that house, he or she is not going to show you that house before getting you to sign a contract. At least we're not supposed to. Okay? So that is part of the settlement, that we're not supposed to be showing any buyers any houses unless we have a signed contract in hand that spells out our compensation. So you can expect that. So if you talk to a buyer agent, he says, yeah, I'd love to show you the house, but I need you to sign a contract. And you go, wait a minute, that's not true. You don't need me to sign a contract. It is true. They do need you. And when you make the next call to the next one, they should tell you the same thing. Do I know that that's what everyone's going to tell you? I do not, right? I can just tell you what the settlement says and what the organizations that have settled have been telling us that we need to do. So bottom line here is that as a buyer, if you have these contracts, and you're probably going to have to sign one, my suggestion to you is that you review them very, very carefully and ask questions about how long this contract goes, how much commission is paid, and how you get out of it if you need to. These are questions you should ask any contract that you sign, but now you're definitely going to have to ask them about this contract, so I hope that you do. Now, if I was a buyer and I didn't know my buyer agent very well, I might ask for a test drive contract where we're only partnered up for 2 or 3 houses, and if I decide to buy one of those 2 or 3 houses, I will pay the buyer agent. But if I decide that I don't want to buy any of those houses and I don't want to work with that agent anymore, then I can go work with someone else. 2 to 3 houses is not a big commitment for a buyer agent to make sure that the fit is right between the buyer agent and the consumer. I would be happy to do a test drive contract. And I think that some of the agents that won't do test drive contracts are very worried about the quality of service or their knowledge about housing. So you should be cautious about people who are not willing to do test drive contracts. And these are the kinds of things that I would probably think about asking for. Now, eventually, if you do a test drive contract, someone's going to look for a longer contract. At some point, there's a lot of time invested and a lot of knowledge that's been transferred to you as a buyer. And at that point in time, a longer contract probably makes sense to do. So, but you should talk about that process with someone who you think will be a good buyer agent. If the buyer agent is inexperienced, make sure that they have support. Make sure that they have a mentor or a team lead or all sorts of things. So you definitely want to make sure that that you have someone who's experienced before you sign a long-term contract with them. So again, just pay a lot of attention to that contract. I can't say that enough. If you're going to sign a contract, make sure you know what it says. Okay. Now, as it's going to come down that buyers are going to often ask, wait a minute, if I'm paying the buyer agent, am I paying extra? Well, no, you were paying the buyer agent before. The only difference was it was as part of the transaction, so you didn't have to talk about it. Now you have to talk about it because in order to put it in the transaction, we need that contract again. And so, but at the end of the day, it's the same. If there's a listing agent and a buyer agent, I have a feeling the amount of commission in that transaction is going to be roughly the same. So there are a lot of opinions out there on the internet about what's going to happen to commissions. This is just my opinion. I think they're going to stay largely the same. I don't really think buyers are going to want to buy houses on their own for the most part, and I don't think sellers are going to all of a sudden, after years and years and years, start selling houses on their own. So I just don't see any of that happening. But at the end of the day, we're all going to watch the movie and find out what happens. If they're not paying extra, if it's the same amount of commission, what happens if I don't use an agent at all? Can I save money on that house by not using an agent? Some buyers are going to try this. I mean, the math is pretty clear, but here's the problem. The problem is you're giving up your representation. Now, if you don't think that the buyer agent you're using or plan to use is very good at representing you, you should probably go talk to some others. I think you'll find that they are probably very good at representing you, and they are probably a really good protection against something very bad happening to your money, or very bad happening to the house that you're going to buy. So I think a lot of us do consider ourselves to be experts in this space. I know that my buyers tend to come back to me and allow me to list their houses, for which I am very grateful. But I think that's because they see value in the knowledge and the information I can provide. So I really don't think that that's going to change. So, but at the end of the day, these are kinds of the issues that you want to think about. If you're going to represent yourself, you have to make sure you're going to be able to value the house. If you value the house wrong, you're probably going to overpay. I mean, on the situations where you value the house too low, you're going to write an offer that's low and you're not going to win because you don't know what market value is. And the situations where you win, you might win by outbidding everyone by a substantial margin, also because you're not clear on the valuation. And if you think it's easy to value housing, I will just tell you that it usually takes agents who are working in this space 2 to 3 years before they get a good feel for it. So it is not easy, and unless you plan to look on houses for 2 to 3 years, you may find it difficult yourself. Now again, some people are very good at this. They don't need the help. This video is not for them. But for other people, these are the things you need to think about. The offers themselves, the constructions, and the way that we write them, and the kinds of things that we ask for, they depend on the market. It depends on who has the leverage. Some of the things I was asking for pre-pandemic, I can't ask for today because the buyer has to take on a little bit more risk because it's the seller's market. If the seller's market flips around, I'm going to start writing that stuff back in. That's what we do when we have our thumb on the market. So you really can't just go on the internet and say, what's a good offer for me to write and what kind of conditions do I need? That kind of stuff changes all the time. And depending on the kind of house that you're buying, it changes all the time. The kind of offer you write on an antique that needs a lot of work should probably look a little bit different than a house that's brand new. But believe it or not, you need protections in both cases. Plus, there are other things that you need to worry about, especially with things like pools and permits and all sorts of things that agents like myself have to deal with when we're listing, and we tell buyers about to be careful of when they're purchasing. But you're not going to know about any of those things if you're not doing them. And of course, home inspections are super challenging for buyers to negotiate. I have done many deals where the buyer has come direct and tried to negotiate the home inspection, and it does not go well for them. Okay, they don't know what to ask for. They don't know how much anything costs. And basically, by the time I'm done, my seller very rarely has to pay out anything at all. And that's because I know how to frame it. Okay, I mean, that's my job. My job is to protect my sellers, the price that they're offered, and make sure that they give up as little money in a home inspection negotiation as possible, to give up as few concessions as possible there. That is the nature of the job. And on the buy side, it's my job to get as much as I can. But in order to do that, you have to know where the soft spots are. You have to know where you're going to be able to negotiate. Most buyers do not know where the soft spots are, or what's reasonable or not reasonable, or how much stuff costs. So what's going to happen is a lot of deals are going to fall apart because they don't feel that they're getting good valuation during their home inspection. Then they're going to buy another house, get another home inspection, and that one's going to fall apart. You could be knee deep in home inspections and still not have a house. Okay, I mean, I know that that's going to happen for some people. I wish I could stop it from happening for them, but I can't because not all of them are going to watch this video. But it is going to happen. So the other thing that I think people need to understand is I think most listing agents are going to adopt a dual rate structure. If the buyer comes direct, they're going to charge the seller more money, which means if the commission was here, oh, sorry, I got to get my hand into the frame. If the commission was here, okay, but the buyer comes direct, then they're going to charge here. And this is pretty close to full commission, which means there's not going to be a lot of change in what full commission is. Why? Listing agents aren't going to want to do all the work on the buyer end. They're not. And they're not going to do it for free. They are definitely not going to do that. So they might do it the first time by mistake, but if buyers coming direct becomes a common occurrence, that's gonna go away. We'll do dual compensation agreements, and that'll be it. The listing agent will do twice the work and get close to twice the money, or maybe even more. I don't know. It depends on how they structure it. But the savings that the buyer pays isn't going to be there because the listing agent is going to be charging the same amount of commission. That commission is not going to move around as long as buyers and sellers still need help. Again, that's an opinion, but the work is the work, folks. The work is the work. So if you are thinking of going it alone, I encourage you to think about this situation. Now, I did try to think of something that isn't all that rare, okay, but ultimately can be very, very expensive for a buyer. So a buyer makes an offer on a property. It's a competitive bidding process, and the buyer offers $40,000 over the market price. Now, I didn't say list price, I said market price. The list price is sort of irrelevant here. The agent has probably a pretty good idea and has already told the seller what can expect, and all of a sudden they have an offer here. They have 3 offers that are all around the same price, and then this offer is $40,000 over them. So market's over here. Market is where the most of the offers are. And then there's this one offer, and it's a lot higher. Well, the problem is the agent knows that that house isn't likely to appraise. So we'll go back to that top offer and say, hey, we'll take this offer, but you have to waive your appraisal. The buyer wants the house, and he thinks it's worth that amount of money, so the buyer agrees. Well, that's fine. You do the home inspection. They work everything out. They do the purchase and sale where the buyer makes a big deposit. We'll say in this case the deposit is $20,000. It's probably more, but we'll say $20,000 for the deposit. And then the appraisal comes in after the P&S is signed. And the appraisal comes in at market price. And here's the tip, folks. Most appraisals come within 5 to 10K a market. Okay, appraisers are pretty good at valuing property. I don't know if you knew this. So the appraisal comes in at market price. So now what the buyer has promised, okay, is $40,000 more than what the appraisal comes in. Well, the bank isn't going to give you another $40,000 in most cases. The bank is only going to agree to give you a little bit more money if you come up with the rest. So what I have here are the numbers that are written out where the bank gives you $4,000 and you need to come up with another $36,000 in cash. Well, what if you don't have the cash? If you don't have the cash, you can't get the mortgage. That's what happens. If you don't get the mortgage, then you can't buy the house. And that means that you have to break the deal. And you have to break the deal because the appraisal didn't come in. But the problem is you waived your appraisal contingency. And that means you're going to lose your P&S deposit. Now, losing your P&S deposit, which is $20,000, is better than losing $36,000, but you're out a ton of money, and you probably aren't going to be able to buy another house for a while because that deposit was key, was important to your overall financial condition. And now you've got $20,000 less to work with. Listen, this is happening now in this market. There are people losing some or all of their deposits because they're waiving appraisal conditions, which, by the way, it's a bad thing to do. Okay, don't do that if you don't have to. But understand, most of the buyers today who are waiving their appraisals are doing so based on information that they've gotten from an agent and maybe an attorney, and they understand what they're doing. But in this scenario, the buyer probably didn't understand the kind of risk that they were taking. This is a complicated example. Did you, when I started this, think all the way through to what happens when the appraisal comes in short, when there's an appraisal shortfall? I'm not sure that you did. And, you can really lose a lot of money. You can get hurt very badly with this kind of thing. So you need to be very cautious. You can go it alone. Try to save yourself 1% maybe, which is what I think your best case scenario in savings is. But the risk that you're taking is definitely non-zero, and you should factor that in. So, okay, so I've already seen out there on the boards, they say, well, they'll just get an attorney to represent them. That solves some problems, right? But I don't think the attorney's going to start showing you houses on Saturday, right? So you're still seeing the houses on your own. And as a general rule, attorneys kind of work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. The very good ones will get online and shoot around a couple of emails on the weekends and are really into customer service. And I love those guys. You know, that's how you want to be if you're an attorney. But they're not going to make a job of it. Okay, real estate agents, we work every weekend for the most part. And we work at night. I've done deals well after 9 o'clock, sometimes as late as 11. That's what it means when you're a real estate agent. You have to get this stuff done when it's time to get it done. And sometimes there is no waiting. There is no tomorrow. There is no 2 days from now. Sometimes you've got to move very, very quickly in this business, and that is how it is. So, and attorneys, I've seen customers do this. They ask the attorney, they say, "You think that's a good price for the house?" They just look at them and they go, "I have no idea." They didn't see the house. They haven't seen any houses. You know, they're not out looking at houses on their weekends. They already own a house. That's the house that they know. If their house is similar to your house and it's in the same town, then they can probably take a stab at it. But it isn't what they do. It isn't what they do. So I think some people will try to go this way, but there are a lot of problems with doing it this way. Okay, attorneys and real estate agents serve different functions. They're not easily replaceable. I don't think most attorneys want to be real estate agents. There are certainly some real estate agents that would like to be attorneys, but probably not all. And we just have different roles in the transaction, and we have different things that we do. Okay, so final notes. I went over a lot of this very quickly, okay, and I apologize for that, but it's important to try and keep these videos short and on point. So, but at the end of the day, you should recognize that I have not even begun to cover all the different kinds of scenarios and strategies and contracts that are going to be out there and the kinds of pitches various agents are going to be making out there in the consumer world. Bottom line is you need to read everything that you're signing very, very carefully, understand what's a contract and what's a disclosure and what those differences are. So, lastly, I already said it, I'm not an attorney, I'm not offering you legal advice here, but I think making sure that you find a good representative and protecting yourself contractually, both in the contract with that buyer representative and also in your home purchase deal, is just a smart thing to do. I don't think I'm going out on a limb here saying that you should probably find someone who's smart and will help you in your home search and someone who can protect you contractually. That's not rocket science, folks. That's just how it's supposed to be. But now you have to do more of that than ever. And so some of the burden has fallen back on you, the consumer, in order to make sure that your home purchase process goes as smoothly as it needs to. All right, that's it. If you've got questions, contact information is below. Definitely leave comments on the YouTube channel if that's where you are. Thanks, bye.